Dr. Shabana Parvez here on the Desi Buzz Talk Show with Dr. Razwana Begum, joining me from Singapore. Dr. Razwana Begum is a PhD in business ethics and restorative justice from Monash University, Australia, and she is currently a nominated member of parliament in Singapore. She has a wide range of experience and research interests, including public safety, causes of criminogenic behavior, criminal justice systems, restorative justice, children and family protection, and also leadership and ethical behavior in commercial and social services. She's also a professor, associate professor at the Singapore University of Social Sciences, and is the head of the Public Safety and Security Program in the School of Humanities and Behavioral Sciences. She also has extensive social work experience from the Ministry of Social and Family Development. So, without further ado, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Shabana. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the program.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Can you, Rizwana, can you just give us a little bit about how your journey went from all those years of being a social worker to now becoming associate professor and now a nominated member of parliament?
Oh, well, I think the journey was not really planned to be that way. I studied law and I was born and raised in Malaysia. So when I was doing my studies, I kind of, did not really get a citizenship, so I was stateless. So being a stateless person, it was a bit difficult to get called to the bar here in Singapore to become a full-fledged lawyer. So I think with that consideration, I eventually ended up being a social worker, and that kind of prompted me to be in the ministry. And because of my law degree, I was a probation officer for a long period of time, for almost 19 years. And in that period of time, I went on to do my master's in law, majoring in criminology because I was working with a lot of offenders. I wanted to have that background and understanding. And then I went on to do social work as well because the university wanted me to, my ministry wanted me to upgrade myself. So I went to the local university to do that. And subsequently, I had this opportunity to do a master's in counseling. And that's how I ended up getting, involved with Monash University in Australia. They were very, wonderful because they had this program for a PhD program where I did not need to leave my job. I could continue with my job and stay here in Singapore with my kids. The supervisor used to travel to come and see me. So as I was doing all of those things, I was able to kind of, consider teaching. And as I was teaching part-time, I eventually, after my PhD, I was invited to join the university full-time. And because of my background in the ministry for many years, I was given the opportunity to do my degree in public safety and security. So that really helped as well. So I think it's all not planned. And eventually, when the university wanted to nominate me to be a nominated member of parliament, they wanted someone from the education sector, but someone who had some understanding of the social services as well. And because I joined the university at a later stage, after starting my career in something else in the social service sector for so many years, they felt that I was the ideal candidate. But I was not sure because university professors should have publications, should be able to have a lot of different types of studies and all that. And mine was mainly from the past. So considering that I guess it's Allah's will, I suppose, to a lot of extent. Sometimes we plan and then Allah is the one who planned for us. So that's how I'm in my journey right now.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of education in there. You've done so many different things. It seems like you. Let's break down some of the different aspects of your career and your work. For example, you did business ethics. So, what motivated you to specialize in business ethics? And then a little bit about like what and I guess we can talk about each section a little bit, the business ethics, restorative justice, and then public safety. I know they're somewhat all related, but how did you get into each, section, or what motivated you about it?
Okay, thank you for that question. That's a good question. My father was a businessman who moved from India to Singapore. And as I was growing up, he felt or he wanted me to take on his business, and I did that for a while. For when I was very young, I was running some of his business activities in Johor Bahru and in Singapore, and I've always grown up watching him being very clear about the work processes and what needs to be done when it comes to ethics and how you do business, the relationship that you form with your
Mhm.
customers, with the different stakeholders and all that. So when I finished my master's in law and I was given an opportunity to teach when I was still working as a social worker, my ministry then felt that I should be teaching something that is, to some extent, they said, teach something that's not related to your work. So there is no conflict of interest because of the area of
Mhm.
work that I was doing. So I was teaching company and contract law. And I came across how directors' duties, it's very important. Corporate governance is important. I was teaching all of those things to my students for over 6 years. Then after the
Mhm.
sixth or seventh year, when I was forming my idea in terms of what I should do as part of my PhD, I felt that, oh, there were all these companies that was ruining people's lives. I call them companies that kill. One of the examples I gave in my thesis was the Bhopal disaster in India,
Mhm. Mhm.
where the carbon union carbide company, the
Mhm.
pesticide incident. So all of these companies, what normally happens is if you do something wrong, you're taken in under the company law, corporate law, and generally the individual or the individual will get away with it because there's always this corporate will, because it's a separate entity. But the individual, will go on to start another company. So I felt, what can we do in the context of restorative justice and trying to ensure that the victims of this corporate crime is also, somewhat being reimbursed, or there is some consideration given. So that's my connection between restorative justice when I work with individuals within the criminal justice system and what I do within the corporate system.
Okay. So for by restorative justice, you are talking about civilians, people seeking compensation for damages done due to unethical practices of businesses, primarily.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so where do you see, actually thinking about that, where do you see the future, or what changes would you like to make in terms of business ethics and uh, corporate social responsibility? Like, where do you see the state of the world or the state of Singapore right now, say, in that regard? And what do you think could be improved, or what is
Mm.
a trend?
Uh,
Or
I would think, okay, maybe I didn't really answer your last question about the public safety and security degree, right?
Mhm.
So within Singapore system itself, our legal system is very efficient and effective, and we are the rating just came out. We are one of the most safest country in the world. We've
Yes,
always
that's
kept it that way,
really wonderful.
However, this whole understanding of corporate crime and business ethics requires individual to look at their role within the business context to be more of doing a corporate good rather than just maximizing profit for the
Right.
investors and the shareholders. It's also taking into consideration what are the needs of the different stakeholders. That also includes your employee, because when a company fails or shut down, taken to task, it's not just the company's reputation or image. It's also the individual who are working for the company would end up, not having a job or they're retrenched. And then, of course, you have the shareholders who are increasingly becoming more and more clear that they would want to invest in companies that are doing social good.
Hmm.
So that investment requirement is actually allowing companies to look back at what they are doing and think through what can I do better. We already got law and rules. If because I was studying this for a long period of time, if you look at car manufacturing companies, when they do
Hmm.
something wrong, they fail to do certain things in terms of certain quality checks are not there, they would end up
With the recall.
recalling the cars,
Hmm.
and they will be sued, and all that. It's the
Hmm.
same thing with pharmaceutical companies. So many different companies have already got this external legislation. What I was trying to do was, how do you get your internal employees to conform with that without looking at it as these are the law that I need to follow? How do you get internal regulation,
And
without
self-motivated to do that without
self-motivated,
needing to be
yeah,
told.
self-regulation,
Yeah.
self-control, right?
Hmm.
Because you know
Hmm.
that you're playing a part within the organization, and you need to do your part really well and not skip a step, and then just to cut costs or anything like that, and then that's going to have an implication long run. We have enough case studies now to show that. We have enough cases that has gone to court, enough companies that has been taken down, and enough
Hmm.
individuals that are being sued, and sent to prison. So I think all of those things are deterrents. And in Singapore, because we are small, and we don't have a lot of resources. Our main resources are people, and we are really looking at how do we ensure that the business environment, the economy stays, the same, or at least, we grow our economy. And for that, we need to be very clear. If people want to come and invest in our very small city, they need to make sure or ensure, and we need to be able to guarantee that our rules, regulations, our systems are all in place.
Hmm. Yeah, so I can see that's really how you overlap all of those. So then, in your role at Singapore University of Social Sciences, right? You're the head of the Public Safety and Security program there. So up to this date, what do you consider has been your most impactful work?
Um, I started a degree together. I mean, this was an initiative with the university supervisors, the provost, as well as the ministry that manages, public safety and security here in Singapore. But I was tasked to do a degree that nobody knows what it is. It's called
Hmm.
Public Safety and Security, and I was recruiting students to come on board to do a degree for 4 years, and I was very anxious about the job prospects for them. So I've got students who are already in the profession. They are already our home team, officers who are on scholarship. They do the degree for 3 years, and they are able to go back to the job because they are on scholarship. But the others who decided to do this degree because they were interested in criminology, they wanted to, help the public, they really wanted to be a public safety and security officers, they were taking a real big chance, doing this
Hmm.
degree. And it was during COVID. They couldn't travel overseas to do a degree in criminology and all that. So that was another reason. And I'm the only, we're the only university offering this program, this undergraduate program. So that really made it, very attractive for the students
Hmm.
to do it. But I think my greatest achievement would be this year, all of them graduated, four of them, 4 years. There was
Hmm.
33 students who
Oh,
graduated.
that's great.
Yeah, and they all were able to get a job.
Hmm.
Not all of them got the job that they wanted, but almost, I think, 60-70% of the students were able to get a job that they were able to, succeed in, and what they really, appreciated. And some of them managed to go into aviation security, some of them managed to go into the ministry itself, and be part of the police force and all that. So I think that would be my greatest I guess achievement, because
Contribution
the
and
students'
achievement.
contribution.
It's
Yes,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, you answered a little bit of what I was going to ask next is like, what are the kinds of jobs within public safety? So, because it's not quite a criminal justice degree, it's a public safety degree. So does it
Yes,
cover things like, said, airport security, like TSA officers, law enforcement, even police? Do
yes.
you have in Singapore some sort of like citizen police, or is that anything like
Yes,
they
we
do,
do.
or?
We have what we call the home team officers. They belong
Mhm.
to the police. They belong to prison. They are firefighters. Um,
Okay. Okay, so it covers
yeah,
quite a range of
yes,
services.
it
All
covers a
under the
whole
umbrella of
range.
public safety and
Um,
security.
yeah, yeah. But
That's
there is also demand from the private sectors, because now
mhm.
increasingly I see even hospitals taking in public safety officers. One of my students is working in a hospital setting. Ministry of Transportation, even food security has become public safety and security after COVID. So I think all of those things are all tied together, and the ministry has been looking at it. The government has been looking at it from a holistic perspective, especially after COVID, because logistics, transportation, food are all linked, and when border shuts, these
Safety,
are all your
security.
priorities for a small
Right.
state like us, because we don't have resources of our own.
Right. That's what about other research that because you talked about you've also researched criminogenic behavior. Like, could you talk a little bit about that? How do you have what perspective do you have? How does that change your perspective? The criminogenic
Um,
behavior, restorative justice, and how restorative justice that influences the broader criminal justice system in Singapore.
um, Okay, that's an interesting question, because when we started, or at least when I studied about restorative justice, that was in 2001. And I have a course now in 2020. So it took a very long time, for us to kind of, put this into place. And that was only, I guess, because of my background. And I understood there was a need for us to look at restoring individuals before we could even get them to be reformed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I started working with uh, my people in contact with the law, I would call them my probationers. They usually are my girls or my boys, just like how in schools you would address them in
Mm-hmm.
that way. I learned that a lot of them have had some negative experiences in the past, what we would call adverse childhood experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and that has affected them in terms of the choices that they make, whether they choose to be in school or not, or if they're not in school because they could have had or they are having going through some sort of undiagnosed mental health issues, and then they are out because the school suspended them or terminated them, and then they get into trouble. So a lot of them, it's circumstantial. One of the things that we do is we always ask, what was the circumstances leading to your offense? So they are supposed to narrate this, and when you look back and you look at the family background or the school, and all this information that you put together, because at the end of the day, when we put up a report to the court, we need to ensure that this individual will not reoffend to some extent. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot guarantee that, but we have a risk assessment tool, and then the
Mm-hmm.
judge would expect us to kind of be very certain there is no risk to public safety. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we may need to place this person behind bars.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking at all of those, I realized in order for me to work with these people, they may be young or old, because there is no minimum age requirement in that sense. You need to kind of really work towards restoring them first before we could talk to them about the victims, because I have had young people coming to me and telling me, oh, I took this item from a big supermarket. The supermarket is very rich, it's a very big complex. I don't think by taking something that's worth $10 is going to make them lose any money. But getting them to understand there are people involved, like maybe the security guard got into trouble because
Mm-hmm.
you stole this item. But in order for them to understand that, they themselves must feel that they are being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, I felt that the whole restorative, context is really important. But we do that, within the court system, we do it as part of therapeutic justice here in Singapore. Within the youth court, we try to, we do have family group conferencing and all that. And within probation service, where I used to work, and all our homes, girls' home and boys' home, as well as our prison, we try to implement this. And now I have this opportunity to do it from the university setting, and these are officers who eventually would go out and work with these groups. So that's another way for us to expand. It's still new, it's still up and coming. I've been involved in research looking at restorative justice practices in Asia. We're
Mm-hmm.
coming up with an encyclopedia. So we look at countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan. They are all doing this in their own traditional, way, and it's also quite much, very much related to how we do it in Islam, how we do conflict resolution in Islam as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all this, opportunity for me to put together chapters from different countries in Asia makes me realize that this is not really a new way, of dealing with people. It's just that we have the circular way, or the ones that's been given to us in the form of statutes and legislation, and Singapore still follows the English legal system to some extent, because we were colonized by the English, by the British, so things like that. I think it's just about how do we go about doing this in a form of a more relational manner. So it's up and coming, I must say, but there's a lot of hope. And I believe that, the more people are trained at the university, the more they can look at it from Singapore's context, and how do we introduce some of this, when we work with offenders. Like as I mentioned before, we have very strict rules and very strict legislation and regulation, and it works for us. We don't have a state where there's a lot of people being criminalized, or there are a lot of victims. The system is very good. So that's also another reason why, people would ask, why do we need such mechanism? But I feel there is a need for it, so that we can also do crime prevention, and then also heal those who have been victimized, especially those now online. There's so many online victimization that we need to be mindful about.
Yes. So you talked about, can you talk a little bit more about your role as the advisory member in the Singapore Youth Court, and then the impact of your guidance on the youth rehabilitation? I guess you mentioned a little bit about that you really, your primary goal would be to think about probation, or working with the youth. You're trying to keep them out of prison, right? Out of being behind bars. Tell us a little bit more about your work with the youth.
Okay, so in terms of my previous career, I was a probation officer, and that was really, two parts to it. One is you do investigation. The referral usually comes from the courts, and then the judge would ask, like, okay, prepare a report. It's a standard report that's according to the act. What are the requirements, to ensure that a person can be placed on community-based rehabilitation, which is probation. And then the second part, of course, is to do the supervision. So usually, if let's say someone comes in for a theft offense, and we assess the risk, and we say to the judge, okay, this person should be given probation for 15 months, because that's the duration that we need to kind of, focus on all his risk issues. And then, the second part will be the supervision, where we provide counseling, we provide, community service, we get the person to go back, and give back to the society. There is a curfew, the person is required to go to school. So those are all the supervision that we need to do. So in that course of work, again, I've met many people who have shared a lot of their stories with me, because some of them are with me for 3 years, and I'm like their closest buddy right now, because they need to report their movements, what they're doing, where they're going, and all that. And sometimes talking with the family, because it's not just about the child. You need to make sure that the family is also aware of what are the conditions and what you need to do. So sometimes we do this thing called relapse prevention. Like we get the individuals to go through a series of group work, and then to assess, okay, what would stop me from committing an offense again? So if I walk past the shop, see nobody's looking, what can stop me from taking an item? They will sometimes have certain things in their wallet, like maybe a picture of their mom, because they remember how the mother was so upset when the child got arrested. Some of these parents will tell me, I've never been to a police station before, I've never been to court, and I'm here now because of my child. And I would like to really make sure I get my child back. Please don't send the child to prison. So there's all these emotions happening as well. So that the individual will remember, okay, so I got to remember not to do this. Sometimes some individual requires medication. They could be having some kleptomania tendency. They're just taking because of the need. They don't even know why they need those items. So then that's where we work with the medical professionals, as well as counselors and psychologists to help them. So these are all the different things that I was doing. And some of the offenses can be really sad, because it could be between two individuals, between families. Sometimes you have a child taking money from the parent, and it can be really daunting. And and scary when they found out, oh no, my child is like that. He's been taking, money from me and I didn't even know. So it can be a lot of
Right.
anger, disappointment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously that's where all your social work experience and that counseling also comes in to help. What other key lessons have you learned from that ministry, the Ministry of Family and Social Development, that
Um,
as you've learned?
I think one of the key things I learned is people have got a lot of inherent strengths,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very resilient. I mean, I do see families argue and fight, and they go like, I don't think I can take care of my child anymore. Please take him away, or they will go on the basis of there's nothing I can do. I've done everything as a parent. You can't teach me any more skills. I have no more skills, I got no time to do this. But eventually, when it comes to really about the connection and the bond that you have with your child or with your family member, they will rise to the occasion. So I think that is something that I learned about families and how important it is to never give up, because I have seen over 2 years, 3 years of supervising someone, they eventually become, I mean, they do become, they are good people. It's just that they have taken a wrong path
Mm-hmm.
temporarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do come back to the right path if we have enough faith, and that faith and confidence and love and support must come from the family as well. So I've seen how families who are really, underprivileged, low income families, and yet, they would do everything within their means to support their child, sometimes to support their grandchildren even, because their own
Mm-hmm.
children, the grandparents' children are in prison, and then that's why the child is in trouble, right? So they are looking after their grandchildren. So I think it's really the human factor and how.
Mm-hmm.
With connection and ability, they are able to rise above any kind of problems.
Yeah, I think they're very lucky to have you in their ecosystem. Um, Talk a little bit about ethical behavior and leadership. Is you mentioned that you have 4 R's that you talk about when you're thinking about ethical behavior and work and leadership.
Yes, I think it goes back to what I have gathered from my work with probationers. I was doing my PhD when I was still working as a probation officer, and I was also teaching company and contract law at the university. And as I was talking to all these employers, big companies, and I asked them, "What do you do? How do you get your employees to conform to all these rules?" And this was during the global financial crisis, and when I was collecting the data, and one of them was a big international bank, and he was telling me that, look, all my people are really smart people, and what I do really is to make sure that they understand how these rules, because it's a lot of rules during I mean, within the financial sector, there's many rules, and it keeps adding on because of the crisis and because of what happened with all the banks collapsing and all that. So he said
Hmm.
it was really important for him to sit down every Friday to speak to his employees about how do you highlight the behavior of these rules. So these rules are in your statute or written somewhere in your workplace policy manual or whatever. But how do you actually provide indicators through your behavior that you are a banker that's going to go with proper, know your clients requirements and all of those things, right? You're not just going to take your client's money and then make the client lose money. So how do you attract investors, in a way to highlight that you are following certain code of governance, certain guidance. So I think he built his relationships throughout, during the crisis when people were struggling, people were being retrenched. So another company that was a construction company, and he said that if you make your employees your best friend, then they're not going to stab you from the back. So I think this is where I kind of looked at what I was doing at work. So
Hmm.
within the workplace, we try to build relationship because that's what's going to keep this person away from crime,
Hmm.
and not just the law and the rules, because the probation period will come to an end, and then they are out there on their own, how are they going to continue, be being a law-abiding citizen? So relationship, and then within the commercial organizations, the leaders were sharing with me that they were looking at all these ways to connect with their own employees. So I felt that there was a need. I looked at all the data and I felt, okay, to build relationship, there was basically these 4 R's. One is respect. You literally need to make sure that you kind of, because a lot of the leaders told me as well, if you treat your employees bad, sometimes they would sabotage you. They would purposely do things against the law and the rules so that you can get into trouble, and then they will quit and go, things like that. So respect is really, really important. Then responsibility, how do you teach? It's not just giving them that manual and say, okay, you're going to read about this. You have someone new who's just joining you first day at work. You can't just expect the person to know everything. How do you do this kind of explanation through your behavior, through your conduct? So that's where the responsibility comes in. And then there's restoration and reintegration. These two came up because I was asking about what happens when someone do not follow the rules and they know, and then they want to come and tell you, they want to admit to you, hey, I've not been doing this, and I've not been doing this for 1 year, and I know I'm creating a lot of problems, because this is one of the reasons why big companies collapse. We have all these companies called too big to fail and all. A lot of it collapsed because the individuals in the company knew something was wrong, or they were doing something wrong, but they were not able to come forward and share because they were afraid what's going to happen to them, right? So that's where the reintegration part comes in and the restoration part comes in. So if we can create a work environment which is built on relationships, that's looking at your relationship between one another, within the company, with the stakeholders, with the clients, with the community, and then you look at it in terms of how do I, bring people back, because people will make mistakes. Not everyone's going to follow the rules, but how do we get them to come forward and share that, hey, I've not been following the rules. I've broken the rules. I'm really sorry about it. Can we do something about it? So that's where you kind of like look at it as, okay, someone comes and tell you this, instead of terminating them and firing them, you ask them what happened. One of the leaders told me that if you have one finger pointing at one person for doing something wrong, 3 fingers are pointing at you. Yeah,
right.
4 pointing at you, So you need to really look at what are your mechanisms, why is it that this person is not following the rules? Maybe your rules is one that you need to look at first. So I think those are the 4 key principles that I looked at in relationship. They're all restorative justice values. So really not looking at it within the companies for your own employees, not being punitive, and not pushing them away, but it's really about how can you get them to come back and then, admit to what they have done and then restore them back into that whole ecosystem.
Right. So that's, I guess, helps a little bit. My next question is about how do you think businesses and social services can better integrate ethical practices to create a more just society?
I would think that if you have the intention and the objective and the vision of your organization clearly explained at the very beginning, and people choose to join you because of your belief, even if it's for-profit company, I think it's important to realize that profit and reputation and branding is very much tied to ethics these days. Because of the social media, it's very easy for people to just film something, and share it, and it goes viral, right? And then your brand will be affected, and people can easily boycott a brand and all that. So I think looking at all of those things, it's really important to explain this to everyone within the organization and to put measures in place to make sure that you are aligned to that particular, underlying objective, and to build a relationship, right? To not just treat individuals as just, machines or mechanisms for you to make your ends meet. They are people and they have their own aspiration. You may not be able to do it for everyone, especially if it's a large MNC, but you can create pockets within the organization for people to be able to be champions of this relationship building or restorative beliefs or restorative practices. I think by doing so, then it's a lot more easier. Look at your code of corporate governance, look at it and see how you can translate that into a more restorative manner, so that people know that every action that I do, I can potentially cause harm to the company, and that could potentially affect my job, right? So it's really about highlighting what's in it for them, but doing it in a restorative manner. I don't think it's any different from the rules and regulation. When we give rules and regulations, we say, follow this, otherwise you'll be given a fine or you'll be in prison or whatever. But I think this is really looking at it from how do you even get them to conform, so that they're not even thinking about what happens if I break the law, right? So because they're already doing it at the very
Back. Okay. So going on to now your latest role, I mean, all the work you're doing sounds amazing, and I love the interconnection of everything. Is what I see in you is somebody who is obviously very passionate about their work, and also somebody who, I mean, it's like you really want to see the best in everyone and everything, and give everyone the best chance to, to rehabilitate, to just like see the good in everyone and give them the maximum benefit of that, I guess. So I applaud you for that. Going on now to your current role as a nominated member of parliament, what kind of priorities do you have in this position in terms of policy changes that you want to see, especially regarding public safety, family protection? What are you going to focus on in this term?
Um, I've been in this role for about slightly more than a year. So I'm given the opportunity to speak on bills and do some adjournment motions and all that. So generally, the bills that I've been talking about, areas that I'm familiar with. I'm mindful that it's important when I speak on certain bills, it's because there is some value to add to it, rather than just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. So I'm mindful about, like, the recent one was on a community dispute resolution bill that we passed in November. And one of the things that I was concerned about is we are looking at community dispute between neighbors, for instance, and can we incorporate restorative, conflict resolution mechanisms? Are the officers trained? Because this is going to be a new portfolio for them, right? How are they going to do this kind of dispute, and it could be sometimes the dispute is because someone could be having mental health issues that's not diagnosed, and that's why they are playing really loud music at night or something like that, right? So I think it's really coming from my experience on the ground. I think because I got this many years of experience looking at what people end up doing when they break the law or why they broke the law. So now that I'm given an opportunity to kind of contribute to the lawmaking process in Parliament, I will try to bring in the voices of those people that I've worked with. It could be the individuals, as in the officers, who sometimes struggle. They go like, too many workload, I need more of this, I need more of finance assistance for doing something new. Or it could be the individuals who go like, or the parents who go like, I didn't really know that there was such a law. So those are generally the questions coming from me. I tend to go from that angle. It helps as well because I have the law background in the past, and I was teaching company contract law for a long period of time. So I try to look at the legislation from the words that they use as well and how clear it is. So those are a few things that I've been doing. Apart from that, we also have an opportunity to talk about any topic that is of interest to us, and that's as part of an adjournment motion. So the standard, work within Parliament is really passing on the legislation, asking questions to the lawmakers and the ministries, and this is usually done by the elected member of parliaments, and then of course the last one is the adjournment motion. And in that adjournment motion, I've been talking about children, gender equality, as well as education. And the recent one I spoke on was on menopause and how can we support women with this, and what can employers do more,
Mhm.
because in Asia this is not a topic that is spoken about, and I think
Mhm.
it's something that we need to discuss, and it's
Mhm.
part of diversity, inclusivity, and being
Right.
equal, and also it's also a way for us to ensure that older women, senior women are staying in the workforce. They're not dropping
Mhm.
out of the workforce because of whatever problems and symptoms that they're having. So this again actually came from okay, so there are bills that's been discussed on this in the UK and in Australia, and
Mhm.
also two of my students from the university, young students who are taking gap year, to actually promote this, and they are from logistics and human resource. I was very impressed when I saw what they're doing as young people, and they're talking
Mhm.
about this topic. And then I thought, okay, so maybe I should look into this, and that's how my research began. And then I spoke about that. So those are the things that I do, and I try to bring in the my experience from the past, and also now that I'm within. So as a president of the Singapore Women Muslim Association, I get to engage with a lot of social workers as well.
Mhm.
The social workers are able to share with me,
Mhm.
some of the challenges that they're facing, and maybe, sometimes they will tell me like, can we do a bit more of this? Can we consider this? So those are the things that I discuss and talk to within the ministry as well, in
Mhm.
Parliament, and I think being an advocate for the voices of these
Yeah,
people,
that's what it sounds like. Giving a
yeah,
voice to the voiceless and trying to make sure
yes,
everyone has their needs met in
yeah,
society. Sounds like
yes,
that's
yeah.
like the ideal that every politician really should be like. So, are you any other projects that you are particularly excited about coming up that are, with this vision that you have for public safety and justice and equality? Any specific projects that you're excited about coming up?
I'm looking at how I could expand the concept of public safety and security um, to the countries in Southeast Asia as well.
Mm-hmm.
So now I do get some opportunities apart from writing, like doing the encyclopedia on restorative justice in Asia. I do get opportunities to go and speak about this. So I'll be traveling to the UAE in January to talk about public safety and security. And Singapore has got a very good system.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that I'm really excited about. In December, I'm going to Australia with a group of students. There's 29 of them, and we are traveling to look at the public safety over there. And this year, we've been doing quite a bit of this exchange. In fact, coming week, I've got students from Argentina as well as from India coming to Singapore to find out a little bit about our total defense strategy, and what we are doing in Singapore. And these are either students who are doing public safety and security, who are in the police force, or they're just doing a degree but they're visiting Singapore and they would want to hear from us. So I'm looking at how can we build ecosystem where everyone is able to kind of connect with one another. Increasingly, I do get a lot of questions as well from the media on how do we handle technology facilitated, sexual crimes, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Scams, I talk about that quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel it's very exciting to look at. Excuse me. I'm
That's it.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very exciting to look at how can we address this, how can we prevent this, crime. From a probation officer's perspective, I don't know what I will do if someone like this come into probation. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
how I would work with that person, to look at the
Mm-hmm.
rehabilitation strategies. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at developing more courses in that, looking at digital crime, and
Mm-hmm.
digital experience, and is there a way, can we use our traditional criminal justice theories, criminology theories, or is
Mm-hmm.
there a need for us to look at it from a different angle? So
Mm-hmm.
those are things that I'm excited about, but I'm also very worried, about the impact, because there's so many
Mm-hmm.
people getting victimized. There's this issue with deep fake,
Mm-hmm.
images, young people,
Yeah.
children.
That's going to be
Um,
definitely a big upcoming issue with
yes,
AI, the
yeah,
AI
with
generated
AI.
videos, deep
Yeah,
fakes. That's
yes,
I think that's
yeah,
something on the horizon, which is already happening, but we have to be really
yeah,
much more prepared to deal with it.
yeah.
And so, but it's amazing and really good to hear that you're trying to expand this idea to the rest of South Asia and maybe have more collaboration and expansion of this concept. As a physician, I have a quick question: is public health, also part of under this umbrella of public safety and security? In terms of like we just had the pandemic, is the public health part of this umbrella?
Um, yes, it is. I think from the government's perspective, they're looking at it as crisis management because in the past, when we look at crisis, it's a very traditional approach to crisis, which is like earthquake, floods, maybe things like earth,
Like fire or others? Yeah,
yeah, it's
mass
generally we look at it from a
casualty.
natural
Yeah.
disaster kind of a thing, like tsunami or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But with the pandemic led us to a crisis situation. At least in countries like Singapore, it was because we are a very small state, and then we are surrounded by Malaysia and Indonesia, and our food, everything comes from other countries, right? And then we realized we need to look at the logistics part of it, the human resource part of it. If border shuts completely, like if you look at Australia was completely shut, then how do you get the country to move along? So it becomes more of a crisis situation, and you need to look at it from a crisis perspective. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's when the health sector comes in, right? Because people in
Mm-hmm.
the health sector were focused on they do not have the skills on how do we address situations where people are paranoid or worried that they're going to run out of toilet papers, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that. And from a criminology perspective, it was interesting. People were getting upset in parks because somebody was running too close to them when they were allowed to exercise, and there was still that safe distance measures, right? But people were like really getting angry and upset. So there's also the mental health issues. There is
Mm-hmm.
that issue about how do you look after your health. Do you get your vaccination? There's the technology is definitely a big part in that whole COVID situation about
Mm-hmm.
fake news.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with all this information that's not real?
Mm-hmm.
How do you control that? What do you know what is real, what's not real? How do you address the elderly who've got no access to such information and all that? So I think those are the things that we need to look at, and there's definitely a tie between a link between the health as well as the criminal
It's a
justice
lot.
and public safety a lot.
It's
And mental health as well, right? If you don't
right.
address mental health, then you're taking everybody in and placing them all in prison. That's not going to work. That's not going to
Right.
help as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like understanding the reason behind
Yes.
the act, really.
Yeah.
Sort of,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and now let's talk a little bit about now. So we talked a lot about your work. Just that as we close up, just tell a little bit about your personal interests. Like you apparently you like hiking or cooking, traveling. How do you balance all the things that you have to do, research, academics, politics, family life, and your health, of course. And how do you balance that all? What kind of advice do you have for others about balancing or being successful?
Um,
And how do your personal hobbies, tie into like helping you with your work?
um, I think I believe I have a lot of energy. I think that's what my mom used to say as a child.
Hmm.
I was very energetic,
Clearly,
and and that really
overachiever.
kind of helps with the jobs that I had to do. So I look at it as like, okay, I must complete this. I set my own timeline, and then once I'm done with it, I get I get bored easily. So that's how I end up doing something else, and that's probably how I've accumulated many different studies and education. I think the other thing as well, as a child and growing up, I didn't really get a chance to go to a university because I didn't have the qualifications in terms of I didn't have a passport to travel. So I had to study everything on my own. And I think that kind of like made me feel like, oh, I've got my own control over things. So my
Very
undergrad,
self-motivated then. You're very
yeah,
self-disciplined, very
yes,
self-motivated.
yes. correct,
for free
self-motivated.
time. Hmm.
Just stay focused, and then that helps. And then eventually, when you're working, you have children. My children, my own children, motivated me a lot, to try to be a good parent. I think because you kind of have this paranoia, this job hazard, because you're constantly working with kids who are getting into trouble,
Hmm.
who are breaking the law, and then you come back home and you want to make sure that your children do not do the same thing. So I,
Right.
I try to tell them these are the things that you cannot do. You must know the difference between theft and theft in dwelling, for instance, because there's a difference in the act, right?
Hmm.
So I used to do a lot of that. I've got two boys and they were very active boys, and that kind of motivated me to kind of show them that I must be a good role model to them,
Hmm.
right? And then all those activities I used to do with them, I raised them on my own when they were young.
Hmm.
So because boys being boys, we had to do a lot of we did a lot of fun activity stuff, like we climbed mountains, we did diving together. I used to bring them swimming, so there was a lot of activities, and that kind of
Hmm.
really kept me going. It's true, as a physician and in someone in the health industry, I'm sure you know that when you run or you walk, you kind of like feel very positive about your life. You feel
Right.
very
Your,
good about
your
it.
neurotransmitters improve, your mental
Yes,
function and your actually ability to think or even get new ideas comes in a lot of times when you're
yes,
exercising. So yes.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
vitamin D and all that you get in the sunlight helps
yes,
too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No,
So,
great. So you're
uh,
taking advantage of all that.
yeah, yeah. So doing marathons and 10-kilometer runs. So I used to tell myself I'll do like 2 10-kilometer, one marathon in a year, and that kind of keeps you motivated because you need to do a half marathon, you need to do a 2 10 marathons, 10-kilometer marathons before you can do a 21 or 42,
Right.
full marathon. If you want to climb a mountain, like I remember going with my sister to Kilimanjaro. My sister trained really hard. I was like telling myself, okay, I'm going to do this. So what I do is that I'll just carry a backpack and then just walk up the stairs because we live in apartments,
Right.
instead of going out to the park because you have no time to do that. And that really, because when you're in the mountain you can't come back.
Right.
um, that was I think it was 12 days or 10 days, like you really, it's not like you can take a bus back, or
Right.
backtrack, right? And you will really suffer if you're not trained, if you are not prepared, because you can't walk any further. You can't expect people to, yeah, definitely you can expect people to carry you, all that. So that kind of put you, when you're in that kind of really no way out kind of situation, so you need to really be prepared. And I think that really keeps me motivated.
Hmm.
So end of this week, my boys and myself, we are thinking whether we can attempt to climb another mountain in Indonesia. I'm a bit, worried about it because this whole year has been so busy, no time to train at all. But we still want to give it a shot and see how it goes. It's a little
Wow,
bit
that's
more
amazing.
easier because
Yeah.
they are much older and they can take care of me. When they were younger, I had to look after them, so it's a bit scary. But now it's slightly different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I like climbing mountains too. I just don't. There's not that many around here. Studied one in Wales for charity last year, and then I've only done a half marathon, so I haven't done more than that yet. So, but that's great. It does keep you. It is a lot like focusing. Keeps you focused. You're trying to just go towards the top and keep going. You
Yes.
have like that end in mind or that summit in mind. So
Yes.
literally and figuratively, like as you progress your
Yes. Yes.
work and your life. It's a
Yes.
great parable, I guess, a great analogy. Um,
Yeah.
so, as your, what advice would you give to young professionals that you're aiming to make a difference if they want to make a difference in social justice or public safety fields? Um,
Okay, I think we need to have our intentions and our goals straight and aligned and clear, right? I think it's difficult if you want to try to find that job that would give you that kind of satisfaction. But if you have your intentions and your goals and your ideas and your plans, spelled out very clearly, somehow, whichever role that you're in, you're able to do that. I think what I want to say to young people is you need to pace yourself. Um,
mhm.
I think my generation, sometimes life circumstances is such, you tend to just take it. I don't think a lot of young people these days will go like, oh, if I don't have a passport, I'm stateless. Why can't I go to the university? They might push the boundaries and they say that I really want to do it. But that would eventually, I feel, you're the medical professional here, it will get you burned out, because the kind of challenges that we are facing is very different. And young people being young, they want things done quickly. That's the kind of environment that they've been raised. If they can think back and hold back and reflect, and have their goals and plans and desire clear, eventually it will come to them. It's taking small little steps to that direction, not big steps, because if you take a big steps, you're going to get you're going to run out of energy very quickly, and then you yourself is going to go into a state where you get into depression, and then there'll be a lot of other health implications as well. So it's really a marathon. Pace yourself, but keep your intentions clear and have faith, right? I think have faith in people around us, in whatever, even if it's a terrible first job that you got yourself into, still have faith and look at that first job as a stepping stone for you to learn all the bad things that you don't want, in your next job, right? Don't take it as, oh, I can't do this job and I want to leave, but stay there for a while for you to be able to understand and embrace what's happening. And then I think at the end of the day, remember there is beauty in everything that you're doing. So just like the diving and the climbing, I think one of the things I realized is that when you step out of your comfort zone, you kind of realize there's so many beautiful things out there underwater or up in the mountains, even though it's very difficult to get there, or you need to gear up and make sure you have sufficient oxygen to go underwater. But there is a lot of treasure out there. So it's really being open to all these experiences, and pacing yourself. When the kids were growing up, we used to watch Finding Nemo a lot. I used to always tell them, like, look, if you can't remember things, it's fine. Dory will always say to Nemo, keep swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming, you will get there. So it's really that, just keep walking, and you will get to your goals. But try to spend some time figuring out yourself, what you want. And I think somehow the universe will give you that. For myself, I never really planned this career to some extent. I just took the chance whenever something come up, something came up. I just opened all the doors that was knocking and then walked into it with open mind. Not like, feeling like I must do this. To be very honest, when I studied law, I wanted to become a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer now. I'm doing so many other things that's related to law. So I think it's really having that intention, and somehow you're given all these opportunities despite your life circumstances.
So would you say your secret to your success is just being open to all the possibilities and knocking on all the doors and
Yeah.
Any other secrets to your success? Secret sauce?
I think, it's probably not really secret per se, but having supportive family members is really important. I think my mom was my biggest supporter. I think her dua really made a difference. And now, my husband is another my biggest supporter. So having relationships is really important, even at work.
Social support is very important.
Social support, yeah. Developing your social capital is important.
Yeah. Okay, that's very good, very inspiring. Thank you so much. You've made a big difference, and you have big goals, and I've done a lot of good work, and more to come. So I wish you all the best, and just keep trekking. Maybe we'll see you on the mountain or on, a marathon somewhere.
Yes. We can always plan one together.
Right.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and all the best. Okay.